And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to be looking at every single NBA team, and we are going to be listing a player on each of those teams that has the most to prove. And this was inspired from a Bleacher Report article, and so I'm just going to be talking about the players that they chose and whether or not I agree with that, or whether or not I don't agree with that, or whether I think there should be somebody else in there. I will make that decision on my own. But for the most part, I do legitimately agree with Bleacher Report's list, so I'm just going to go ahead and talk a little bit about that in this segment. It's going to be, I believe this list is going to be in alphabetical order just based off of, the first letter of each team. So, the first team is going to be Atlanta because Atlanta Hawks. The next team is going to be Boston because of B. And then the next team is going to be Brooklyn. You guys understand the idea, all right? So we might as well go ahead, start out with the Atlanta Hawks. And obviously, Trae Young is going to come to everyone's minds. He definitely has the most to prove for this franchise. He's a 3-time All-Star. He's the leader. He was a one-time leader of an Eastern Conference Finals appearance, and ever since then, the Hawks have sort of been in that mid-tier of in the Eastern Conference. They haven't been great, but they haven't been bad either, which really puts them in a tough spot. And for his entire career in Atlanta, the only NBA franchise that he's been on, it's seemingly up. His time there is sort of up in the air. And they already split the backcourt duo with DeJounte Murray and Trae Young this offseason, and they could pivot toward a youth-focused rebuild around Jalen Johnson, Onyeka Okongwu, excuse me if I mess up that last name, Dyson Daniels, Kobe Buffkin, and Zachary Resacher, the number 1 overall pick in the draft. So Atlanta may have already taken that plunge, if not for the fact that San Antonio Spurs have control of the Hawks' next 3 first-round picks. That buys Young a little bit more time to convince this front office he should remain their centerpiece. So it's the real question is, are they going to move on from Trae Young, or are they going to stick with him and try and see if he can be that number 1 option on Atlanta? And in my opinion, he definitely can be. He's already the franchise's leader in assists for the Atlanta Hawks, which is fantastic in of itself considering how many years he's only played for the Hawks. And really, he's been the brightest point of the entire Hawks and their future. So I would be very surprised if they decide to move on from him, but at the same time, Trae Young also wants to win. So he really has a lot to prove to see. If he can lead the Hawks into the postseason this year without getting injured, then there's a good chance that they might actually try to bank on him, and they're willing to build a team around him and try to make it farther into the postseason. Because again, ever since that one Eastern Conference Finals appearance, this team sort of hasn't been all that. Next team on the list, as I said before, the Boston Celtics, and the player with the most to prove is Jaden Springer, and the entire Celtics lineup had a lot to prove before winning this championship. Jaylen Brown had a lot to prove. Jason Tatum had a lot to prove. Drew Holiday had a lot to prove. So did Kristaps, and so did Derek White. But after they won the championship, they have nothing left to prove. They did what they had to do, accomplished what they needed, all of it, they've done it. And it's the only thing that you really need. All you need is to win a championship, and it absolves you of all the things that you've done. Now, if they didn't win a championship, Jason Tatum would be on this list, and he's big, and he would need to prove that he's worth all the money that the Celtics are giving him. But given that he won the championship with the help of Jaylen Brown, definitely deserves all of that money. And excuse me. So, despite this, really the only competent piece for the Celtics is their starting lineup. Despite having support players like Sam Hauser and Peyton Picard, they've already proven their worth. So really the only other player that needs something to prove is this one right here. So he's sort of on this list by default. And the options, they're really, really limited. Kristaps Porzingis, he already proved himself. Everybody already proved themselves. So really, like, and not only that, but his leg surgery also proved to be rather successful. So you have to sort of shift the spotlight down to Jaden Springer and sort of see if he is going to be the NBA quality player that the Celtics hope that he can be, and if he can contribute enough for the Celtics, because everybody else on the team already has proven themselves. So this is he's sort of on this list by default. Now, the next player on this list for the Brooklyn Nets is Cam Thomas. He by far has a lot to prove for this season. Now, he's a fantastic scorer, but we have to see that in the starting lineup. And we also have to see if he can prove to be, if his offense can prove to be so valuable that it could make up for his lack of defense. Now, he was obviously he averaged 25 points per game in 36 minutes per 36 minutes with the Brooklyn Nets. He was a fantastic scorer. And when Kevin Durant and Kyrie were on Brooklyn, everybody was hoping that Cam Thomas would get some time to shine and score the ball the way that he does. His point production is probably going to climb even higher now that Mikal Bridges isn't there and he's mainly getting all of the touches. He is a bucket. The only thing that's wrong with Cam Thomas, in my opinion, is his facilitating. I really feel like his facilitating could be a little bit better. For being a point guard, it's a little bit lackluster in my opinion. And, I mean, Nick Claxton actually had a problem with Cam Thomas at one point because he didn't pass the ball. I didn't really have a problem with it because Cam Thomas ended up making the three-pointer, but it could lead to some chemistry issues down the road. And so, again, his point production is really, we're going to have to see if that point production can increase to maybe 30 points per game, or if it's going to go down to like maybe 17 like Jordan Poole. Because this is sort of like a Jordan Poole situation that we're facing in right now. So he's eligible for an extension, but that feels unlikely given the questions surrounding his supplemental skills and the state of the franchise, according to Bleacher Report. So in a layman's terms, there could be tens of millions of dollars on the line for this season, and it will take more than a spike in scoring to be able to secure that money. So he needs to prove that he can be more than just a scorer. He needs to be a facilitator as well and do more for the Brooklyn Nets. And do more in a sense like LaMelo Ball, where not only is he a pretty competent scorer, but he's also a fantastic floor general and a facilitator. And he is the kind of guy that can make your teammates better and can make your team better based off of his decision making. And so obviously, LaMelo, he's going to have a lot to prove in this season, and hopefully he doesn't get injured. Like, that's really been the thing. Can LaMelo Ball stay healthy? And that's what he sort of has to prove in this offseason. And there's arguments that have been made that LaMelo Ball, when he was healthy for Charlotte, they were able to make the play-in, and maybe, LaMelo is actually the answer, but now this is sort of when Melo has to prove it. And he is a former All-Star and social media juggernaut, but he's also someone who, in the words of ESPN, plays an empty calories game. So essentially, he puts up good numbers, but it's like they're not entirely that valuable. Like, LaMelo Ball's deep threes and highlight dimes are fun to see, but he's never been as efficient as you'd want an offensive focal point to be, as he shoots 42% from the field for his career. And it's not like his effort and execution on the defensive end is exactly tone setting, according to this article. So he just has to prove that he can put up meaningful numbers and valuable numbers and bring wins to the team, as opposed to just being a flashy point guard that can pass the ball really, really well and do amazing flashy passes. So it's like they want to see if he can be Steve Nash or if he's Jason Williams. That's actually, I think that's one of the best comparisons that I could have done right there. I think that's literally it. They're trying to see if he's Steve Nash or he's Jason Williams, because Jason Williams, he was a highlight reel machine. If you guys saw him play, White Chocolate, he's ridiculous. And but obviously, Jason Williams and Steve Nash, completely different players with completely different careers. And while Jason Williams was flashy and a great passer, Steve Nash was rather cool and collected and also a great passer, but he was able to deliver it in wins. Not really in playoff wins, but in regular season wins. So that's really where the comparison is coming in for those of you guys that didn't understand. But for those of you guys that did understand, let me know in the comments what you guys thought of that comparison, because I thought that was peak right there. But enough about that. Next player on this list before I go into a short break is Patrick Williams for the Chicago Bulls. And obviously, Chicago's roster is really it's up in the air. They're rebuilding. I have no idea whether or not Zach LaVine is going to be part of it. I have no idea whether or not they're going to trade Zach LaVine, but Zach and Vucevic, they do have tickets out of town as soon as they convince a contender to come and get them. Kobe White has a breakout campaign to repeat, and they did recently get Josh Giddey, so there is a chance that he does show some flashes. In my personal opinion, I hope he doesn't. But Javon Carter needs to reestablish himself as a role player as well. But excuse me. So there's a lot of players on the team that does have some things to prove, but I feel like Patrick Williams is definitely the highest and the one with the most to prove for this season. He was picked 4th overall in 2022, and really we haven't really heard much about him, and he hasn't really sort of delivered as a 4th overall pick I feel should. And not only that, they also doubled down on the commitment by giving him a $90 million contract this summer. And so now he has to sort of prove that he can be that top 4 pick in the draft. And whether it'll work or whether it won't is still up in the air, and that's really the big question. So he was getting Kawhi Leonard comparisons, and now it almost feels like a joke that he is compared to Kawhi Leonard. So he really needs to step that up. So that's it for the 4th segment. Now I'm going to move on to the 5th segment where I actually continue with this list, since I do have a couple more players that I feel like have a lot to prove, and I do want to go over this list a little bit more in depth. So I will be right back after the short break, continuing on with this list, so be sure to stay tuned.